All right. So, this is going to be an important video if you yourself are a writer, or really if what you do for work requires any type of analysis and anything where you have to read something and then basically break down what it is. I'll probably end up making this part of like a larger series at some point, but for the moment, I want to do a video just laying down a foundational understanding of how to analyze other people's books. If you're a writer, you already know this, but the most important aspect of writing, besides literally writing, is reading. You need to, there's conventional wisdom about you need to read a lot of books, read across wide genres, all that. My opinion on the more specific aspects of what to read and how much and how quickly and all that stuff, I've made a video before where I kind of dissect, where I go over a bit more about my disagreements on some of that advice. But the general advice of you need to read other people's works to improve your own work is true. That core advice is absolutely true. The problem is that most people that I've seen, they read, but they don't analyze what they read. And so this video, I want to start breaking down how to do that. Again, this will probably take several videos at some point to expand upon this. But for now, this is going to be a very foundational video on how to actually analyze another author's book. To do that, you need to understand two very general concepts, content and structure. And I'll add right here, this is not like this type of analysis is not original. I didn't like come up with the idea of content and structure. It's kind of I think it's a bit of a well-known thing, but I don't hear it talked about a whole lot. Now, when discussing content and structure, content is the specific information relative to a certain subject. Structure is how that content is shown. For an example, like if we're talking about like sports, for example, the game of baseball, right? The content is all of the teams, right? So like every single team that plays. So you might have a baseball game where, the Red Sox are facing the Yankees, and next week it might be the Mets and the Blue Jays, right? The teams themselves are the content. They're interchangeable. It varies game to game within the confines of the structure. Structure is the game itself. It's the unchanging aspect of it. So the game of baseball always has the same structure. It's played inside a baseball park. It's 90 feet, I think, between each base. I could be wrong, but it's 9 innings plus extra innings if the game is tied. Home runs, basically, anyone that gets to home base gets a run. You get 3 outs. You get up to 3 strike. Third strike, you're out. 4 balls and you walk. That sort of stuff. The rules of the game remain the same. The structure is the rules, the requirements to play the game. The content is the changing teams and players and all that stuff that operate within the confines of the structure. I hope that helps. I hope that gives a kind of a quick explanation of this. And this idea can be applied to every aspect of, to a lot of different aspects in life. So not just books, but I'm going to apply this now to books. So when talking about authors and how to analyze their books, the content is the actual what they've written, right? The actual story itself. The story is very specific in the details. The structure, though, is all of the author's decision for how they presented the story. And what happens is when people read books, like the average layperson, they read the content. They read the actual story the author wrote. They're not analyzing the structure of what the author chose. And that's often what I think the problem is with those that are trying to become, or with writers that are trying to improve their work, is they read like a reader would read. They read the content, but they don't analyze the structure. And so when I'm referring to the structure of an author's choice, what I'm referring to is, in a book, the author's decision on word choice, sentence structure, paragraph structure, chapter structure, the pacing, the variation, the use of things like metaphor, all of the artistic choices that they use to convey their story. That is structure. That is also what you need to study. So, if you are looking to improve your writing and looking to improve your skills, I would encourage you to stop reading the content and start analyzing the structure. Start reading works and looking at specifically what they are, what these stories are telling and how it's being told. Why did the author use very short, snippy sentences? Why did the author decide to use sentences that are very long and flowing? Why did the author choose to use this sort of voice? Why did the author decide to tell the story in third person versus first person, present tense versus past tense? What are the advantages of having a omniscient narrator versus a very close sort of third narrator? There's a lot of nuance basically involved in this. And if you are looking to improve your writing and looking to take away more of their skill, more of an author's skill, and understand how they pull off the magic, quote unquote, this is how you want to do it. This is the foundation of what you want to do. Start analyzing the structure first instead of the content. So here is a quick example of what I'm talking about. I'm going to show you in a moment here the last paragraph of a short story called Feathers by Raymond Carver. Now, I'm going to quickly show the last paragraph of the short story, and I will do kind of a quick breakdown of the structure rather than the content, okay? Just to give you an idea of what I'm referring to. Quick backstory. So the short story Feathers, it's about this really I wouldn't say well off, but this very happily married couple that has no children. They visit a friend one night out in the country who has a wife and kids, and after spending the evening with them, they decide to have a child. They see how homely the gentleman's wife and his child, they see how homely that life is together, and they decide they want that life too. And here at the very end, we finally see the sort of tragic reaction to their spontaneous decision to have children. All right. So I'm going to throw up on the screen right now. Once in a blue moon, he asks me about my family. When he does, I tell him everybody's fine. Everybody's fine, I say. I close the lunch pail and take out my cigarettes. Bud nods and sips his coffee. The truth is, my kid has a conniving streak in him, but I don't talk about it. Not even with his mother, especially her. She and I talk less and less as it is. Mostly it's just the TV. But I remember that night. I recall the way the peacock picked up its gray feet and inched around the table, and then my friend and his wife saying goodnight to us on the porch. Ola giving Fran some peacock feathers to take home. I remember all of us shaking hands, hugging each other, saying things. In the car, Fran sat close to me as we drove away. She kept her hand on my leg. We drove home like that from my friend's house. Yeah, definitely a bit dreary. But there's a lot in this last paragraph to unpack as far as analyzing structure. So when I'm talking about structure, I'm going to go through just a couple different decisions the author made in terms of constructing this last paragraph. So we know the narrator is someone who works in a blue-collar job. They reference a lunch pail here and taking out his cigarettes. With that, the language that the narrator speaks in is very plain. It matches the style of someone that would work in this sort of blue-collar environment. The other thing to notice is each sentence is very short in, I'd say, fairly punchy. There's not really any sort of run-ons. It's these very short sentences that simply say what they say and they go. They're not trying to dazzle us. There's no attempt at sort of awing the reader with the structure of them. Very simple sentences. Now, after analyzing the sentences, look closer at some of the word choice. Specifically, when he's talking about his wife. He does not actually call his wife his wife. He says that not even with his mother, referring to his kids. So he doesn't even call his wife his wife. He calls his wife his kid's mother. So we can infer there's a sort of distance between the author, or between the narrator and his wife. Something occurred when they had the kid that ruined it. He talks about how the kid has a conniving streak in him, but I don't talk about it. You can sense that he regrets the decision. He regrets the decision to have had a child. The idea of them being, they were happier before they had kids, and he sort of wishes that he would have stayed that way. And then we have a final element of the structure, which is symbolism. So this takes a bit more knowledge. I mentioned in another video way back when I talked about should writers go to college, or should a writer go to college. I mentioned that getting a college education allows you to amass a fair amount of sometimes obscure knowledge that can be useful when you're a writer, as far as analysis and doing the writing. And this is an example. So I don't think many people perhaps know this, but peacocks in literature are considered an omen of bad luck. And what we see in this scene here is a reference to a peacock, and not just a peacock that his buddy had when they visited, but the buddy's wife, Ola, actually gave the narrator's wife some peacock feathers to take home. In essence, she gave them this symbol, this bad omen, directly to them. Again, it's not something that I think people would necessarily pick up right away. It takes a little bit of analysis to know that. But when I talk about learning these sort of obscure things, this is kind of why. This is an example of where that comes into play. But that's it. So that's just a quick analysis of the structure. If you were to then go forward and I guess apply this to your own writing, my hope is that you would take away, just if you happen to have enjoyed this sort of style, is okay. So if I want to write in a similar story, if I want to tell, write in a similar style, maybe I want to tell a story from the perspective of a sort of blue collar narrator. Well, all right. So my narrator would need to probably want to match that same sort of punchy sentences, very short. I want to speak in a very plain sort of language. The way that I use certain words can carry a lot of inference, much in the same way that the gentleman's wife is referred to as his child's mother here at the very end, and sort of contrasted from in the beginning of the story where he's much closer to her. These are the sort of things that when you analyze a structure, you can take away and then apply to your own writing. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope now the idea of analyzing structure of a content makes sense. If you have any kind of questions about that, more clarification on the difference between content and the structure, feel free to leave it down in the comments. What I'll do is I'll probably expand this into a larger series at some point, just adding sporadic videos. But I think for now, if you're trying to just sort of improve the way you can take away another author's techniques, sort of discover how they use their certain styles and how to break them down, this is where you want to start first. It will take time to develop this skill. It will take time to sort of be able to differentiate the specifics of sentences and paragraphs, and understand symbolism, and so it sort of gauge how narrative voice works. It's not something that I certainly knew right away. It just takes time. And one last thing I want to leave off with is when I first started doing this, when I first started analyzing reading more than just reading for pleasure, when I wanted to start being more conscious about reading, I was very overwhelmed. So I in the sense that, having to, when you go from reading a book, just for reading a book basically, and just taking away little things here and there, to actually breaking down like entire paragraphs, word choices, sentences, it can be overwhelming. It can be very, very, I think there was even almost like a certain level of anxiety I felt at the very start of all of this. So I just want to keep that in mind for you. I want to just reiterate that if you feel this way at first hearing this, if this seems very overwhelming, that's very normal. What you might want to do is to start with taking an author that you really enjoy and just simply breaking down a chapter. Break down, or just pick the opening of a book. Just start over the opening of a book that you really enjoy and break down that first paragraph. Just go, all right, here's how is the paragraph structured, how the sentence structured, any certain word choice, anything that makes a voice of the narrator distinctive. Just going through and noticing these small things will be very helpful. And the other thing too is it's a skill you develop over time. Like, you're not going to pick up all these small things right away. It's going to be something where you're going to notice maybe someone's sentences really early on, and then maybe you'll start noticing more about word choice. As time goes on, you might become more aware of word choice, and then become more aware of paragraph variations, and more aware of how chapters are structured. You'll notice certain things that you probably find are weaknesses. If your weakness, for example, is dialogue, you'll probably notice other authors' dialogue first and why they make those decisions, and then you'll kind of expand slowly outward. But yeah, so I do hope this helps. And again, any kind of questions on content structure, just leave it down in the comments and I can answer them for you.